So if you want to see like a masterclass in supply chain logistics, localized intervention, and, composite material engineering, you usually don't look at a Fortune 500 company.
Right. That pick.
Instead, you might actually want to look at a children's book about a flat rock.
Which, I mean, it sounds completely absurd when you put it that way,
Right.
but it's entirely accurate. Like some of the most profound illustrations of design thinking and cognitive flexibility, they actually show up in narratives meant for 5-year-olds.
Yeah, exactly. Which brings us to today's source material for this deep dive. We're looking at a story called Ricky, the Rock That Couldn't Roll.
It's a classic, yeah.
It really is. And, on the surface, it's just this rhyme-filled bedtime book. But when you look closely at the mechanics of what actually happens in the story, it's a surgical deconstruction of how innovation really works.
Oh, absolutely.
Our mission today is we're going to deconstruct Stu's innovative problem-solving process. Stu is a character we'll meet in a bit. But to really appreciate his solution, you have to understand the environment first, right?
Right. Because the setting is it's crucial here. It establishes the baseline norms for everything that happens. You have this grassy hill past the lake where this community of rocks comes to play.
Yeah.
And the defining characteristic of this community is how diverse they are in their origins, but how uniform they are in function.
The diversity is wild, honestly. You have Kai, who is literally a meteorite from another planet.
Yeah, outer space.
Right. And there's Maya, who's made of cooled lava. There's grumpy old Ebert, Parker the Clown, Emma, who is just constantly giggling, Gabby, who is described as sassy.
Right, so they all have these completely different backgrounds and personalities.
Exactly. But the great equalizer on this hill, the thing that allows them to participate in this community, is their shape. Every single one of them is perfectly round.
Because they're round, they can race to the top of the hill and roll back down.
Right. That's the whole point of their society.
Form dictates function.
Right.
Their spherical shape is basically the physical infrastructure that allows them to engage in their society's, primary activity, which is rolling.
And then we meet our titular character, Ricky. And Ricky just sits quietly on the sidelines because, one entire side of his body is completely flat.
Yeah, poor Ricky.
Yeah. When the others call him over to play, his only response is, "I'm sorry, I can't." So we're going to look at this whole scenario through the eyes of the story's observer, Bria the ladybug.
Right.
And you, listening to this, you might be thinking, okay, sure, it's a kid's book about a rock. But consider how many times your own team or, your own company has faced a structural deficit just like Ricky's.
Oh, it happens all the time.
It really does. And I want you to watch how Ricky's friends react first, because their initial reaction is the exact trap most of us fall into.
I'd argue the initial reaction of the community is probably the most realistic part of the entire narrative.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. When faced with an anomaly, human beings, or in this case, anthropomorphic rocks, they just default to the path of least cognitive resistance.
Which brings us to Marvin. Marvin the Boulder is the perfect example of this. So Marvin has this massive, really impressive physique.
Right, he's a big guy.
Yeah. So his solution to Ricky's flat side is just pure muscle. He carries Ricky all the way to the peak of the grassy hill, gives him this, colossal shove downhill, and just yells, "Keep rolling, kid!"
It's so classic.
But I'm looking at this text and thinking, pushing a rock normally works. So why is this such a disastrous approach for Ricky?
Well, because Marvin is falling victim to a fundamental misunderstanding of physics and mechanics, really.
How so?
He's trying to force an output without addressing the infrastructure.
Yeah.
A round rock rolls because its shape converts potential energy into kinetic rotational energy. But Ricky doesn't have that shape. So Marvin's brute force, it doesn't change Ricky's aerodynamics or his friction coefficient at all.
So Ricky just slides. He just slides down the hill, dragging on his flat side.
Just scraping along.
And the book actually notes that Ricky says, "This feels like a bad idea. It's painful." And honestly, it reminds me so much of the corporate world.
Oh, 100%.
It's the exact equivalent of a company realizing their flagship software has a terrible user interface, and instead of just rewriting the code, they double their marketing budget.
Exactly. It's the brute force method. You just push the flawed product harder into the market, shouting, "Keep rolling, kid," assuming that momentum is somehow going to fix a structural deficit.
But it doesn't.
No, it never does. It just creates friction and burns capital.
Right, so the brute force completely fails.
Yeah.
The rocks regroup. And instead of realizing they need, a new paradigm, they pivot to a gimmick.
Ah, yes, the gimmick phase.
They grab a bunch of rubber balls and use these massive gobs of glue to stick them all over Ricky's flat body, and they proudly announce, "This will work."
Which, spoiler alert, it doesn't.
No, Ricky doesn't roll, he just sort of bounces chaotically. The book goes, "Book, you're no good."
What's fascinating here is that this is a classic symptom treatment strategy.
Explain that a bit more.
Well, the group identifies the symptom, right? Ricky lacks the bouncy kinetic energy of a rolling rock. So they try to artificially staple that kinetic energy onto him using the rubber balls.
Oh, I see.
But again, they aren't fixing the flat side. They are just masking it with a feature that doesn't integrate into his core system at all.
It's like slapping a flashy new feature onto a completely broken foundation.
Exactly.
I mean, think about the early days of smartphones, right? When people wanted better mobile typing, companies just glued those tiny plastic physical keyboards onto the bottom of the screens.
Oh yeah, I remember those.
Right. It was a gimmick. It didn't solve the core issue of limited screen real estate. It wasn't until a fundamental redesign of the interface, the touchscreen, that the structural problem was actually solved.
Right.
So why is it that incredibly smart groups of people always default to the metaphorical rubber balls before they actually innovate?
Honestly, it comes down to cognitive load. Genuine innovation, like a true structural redesign, it requires a tremendous amount of mental energy.
Yeah, it's hard work.
It really is. It requires breaking down your assumptions and basically starting from scratch. And the human brain is naturally lazy. It wants to conserve energy.
Right, so it looks for shortcuts.
Exactly. It searches for analogies like balls bounce. Ricky needs to move. Let's attach balls to Ricky.
Right.
It's a fast, low-energy cognitive shortcut.
Which leads to a spectacularly messy failure in this case. And at this point in the story, Ricky just hits rock bottom. No pun intended.
Right.
He sighs, says it's no use, and decides he's just going to give up and sit on the sidelines permanently.
Yeah.
As a reader, it feels like a total disaster.
It does. But, if you study the history of product development, this phase of complete failure is almost always a prerequisite for a breakthrough.
Really? Like, you have to fail first.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
The group had to exhaust the obvious bad ideas. As long as they believed that just shoving him or using glue might work, they were never going to do the heavy lifting of actual engineering.
Okay.
So the failure of the brute force and the gimmicks, it shatters those superficial paradigms. It clears the board.
So hitting a wall forces you to look for a door. That makes sense. But Ricky is done. The only reason the problem stays alive at this point is that his friends absolutely refuse to quit.
Yeah, did it stick around?
They tell him, "We're here for you, brother." And they just sit there with him, completely stuck, just straining their brains. And then an external variable is introduced. The environment shifts. It starts to rain.
The catalyst.
Yes. And this brings us to Stu. Stu is described in the book as the smart stone. When the rain starts pouring down, Stu gets hit with this lightning bolt of inspiration. He shouts, "Eureka! I know just what to do." And I love this. The book includes this great little detail that Stu wasn't too humble when he declared his plan to be pure genius.
A touch of the classic innovator's ego, right?
Yeah, totally.
Which is honestly often required to push an unconventional idea forward. You need that confidence.
Definitely. But I'm stuck on why the rain mattered. Like, rain just makes things wet and slippery. How did getting rained on suddenly solve a geometric structural problem for a rock?
Well, it didn't solve the problem directly, but it broke a psychological barrier. It's something called functional fixedness.
Functional fixedness.
Yeah. It's a cognitive bias that limits a person to using an object only in the way it is traditionally used. So for the other rocks, dirt is just the ground they sit on, and rain is just an annoying weather event that's making them cold and wet.
Oh, I see. They see the objects strictly in their current isolated states.
Precisely. But Stu, he possesses cognitive flexibility. He doesn't just see the current state of the environment. He sees the adjacent possible.
It's like the adjacent possible.
Right. He sees that rain isn't just water, it's a chemical agent. And dirt isn't just a surface, it's a raw material. So he synthesizes the two and realizes the rain is actively manufacturing a brand new, highly pliable resource right under their feet.
Mud.
Mud. The eureka moment isn't magic. It's rapid pattern recognition, and it's triggered by an environmental shift. Great problem solvers, they train themselves to look at an obstacle like a rainstorm ruining a sunny day and ask, What new resource did this obstacle just create?
Okay, that is fascinating. So he saw the potential state of the materials, but, having an idea about mud is one thing, actually executing it is another.
Well, execution is everything.
Right. And this is where Stu transitions from just being an ideas guy to a chief engineer.
Hmm.
Because what happens next is this meticulous step-by-step masterclass in manufacturing. It directly targets Ricky's deficit.
This is the core of the case study right here.
Yeah.
Because Stu basically executes a full-scale industrial engineering project.
Let's really deconstruct this innovative problem-solving process, because the blueprint, the logistics alone are super impressive. They don't just scoop up tiny handfuls of mud and carry them back up the grassy hill to Ricky.
No, that would be terribly inefficient.
The text says they carry our hero down the road about a mile, all the way to the lake.
Which is just brilliant supply chain optimization.
Right.
I mean, moving the raw material, heavy, wet mud, uphill over a mile, that's incredibly inefficient.
Yeah.
Plus, you risk the material drying out during transport.
Oh, true.
So by moving the subject, Ricky, directly to the source of the raw materials, Stu minimizes the logistical friction and creates a centralized manufacturing hub.
Wow, yeah. Then comes the material application. And I really want to pause here because this feels radically different from what Marvin did. They gather up the mud, but they don't just cover Ricky in it like they did with the glue.
Right, they're very specific.
Yeah, they pile it specifically on the flat side of Ricky, creating this mound. Then they shape it, smooth it, and sculpt it until Ricky's overall form is perfectly round. Why is this localized application so much more effective than their previous attempts?
Because Stu is utilizing additive manufacturing rather than subtractive manufacturing or just symptom masking.
Additive manufacturing, okay.
Think about the alternatives. They could have tried to chip away at Ricky's round sides to make him a smaller, symmetrical sphere. But that would be subtractive.
But that would literally mean breaking pieces of Ricky off. It would change his mass, his identity.
Exactly. Subtractive design often requires sacrificing core components of the subject.
Right.
Now, alternatively, they could have tried to put Ricky inside a giant hollow ball, which is just symptom masking again.
Take the rubber balls.
Right. But Stu uses localized additive manufacturing. He identifies the exact site of the structural deficit, the flat side, and adds a composite material to supplement that specific void. It's a targeted intervention that completely respects the integrity of the original subject.
He didn't change who Ricky was, he just completed him.
Beautifully put.
Thanks. So that brings us to the curing phase. They don't just roll him immediately after they pack the mud on. They wait for the rain to stop, and with the sun in the sky, they leave him to bake until the mud is completely dry.
Right, because Stu clearly understands thermodynamics and material science.
Clearly.
Mud, in its wet state, is malleable, which is great for shaping, but it has zero structural integrity for weight-bearing activities like rolling.
Yeah, it would just squish.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So he uses the sun's ambient heat to evaporate the moisture, causing the particulate matter in the dirt to bind together into a hardened, rigid structure.
It is literally baking clay into pottery. But even then, dried mud can be really brittle, which leads to the next step, which is structural reinforcement.
This part is so clever.
They gather up vines to wrap all around Ricky to keep the dried mud together. And by the way, in the middle of all this intense manufacturing, Ricky just quietly asks, "Does anyone have a towel?"
Which is such a great detail.
It is. It's a great reminder that the user is currently trapped inside a wet mud mold.
It really highlights the discomfort of the prototyping phase for the end user. But, from an engineering standpoint, the vines are the stroke of genius here.
How so? Isn't the dried mud enough to just hold him together?
Well, dried mud has high compressive strength, meaning it can bear weight pushing down on it.
Okay.
But it has very low tensile strength, meaning if it gets stretched or pulled by the centrifugal force of rolling down a hill, it will just crack and shatter.
Oh, I see.
So the vines act exactly like steel rebar inside concrete. They provide the tensile strength that the mud lacks, creating a highly resilient composite material.
Okay, so Stu has managed supply chains, additive manufacturing, thermodynamics, and composite material engineering.
He's a busy stone.
He really is. But I have a major question about the very last step.
Okay, what is it?
So before they finish, they take one single colorful feather and tuck it into the structural vines. I get the vines acting as rebar, I really do. But tying a feather to him at the end seems like a massive waste of time during a critical engineering phase. It serves zero mechanical purpose. So why do it?
This is where we cross the line from pure engineering into human-centric design. You're right, the feather serves absolutely zero mechanical purpose. but it serves a vital emotional purpose.
Emotional purpose.
Think about the history of medical prosthetics.
Mm.
For decades, prosthetic limbs were purely functional, right?
Yeah.
Metal rods, plastic joints, very sterile and clinical.
Yeah, they looked very medical.
They worked, but they often made the user feel like a patient.
They felt like a walking repair job.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
But modern prosthetics, they incorporate aesthetics. They have custom colors, sleek carbon fiber designs, personalization. They transform a medical device into a piece of personal style.
Oh.
If Stu just leaves Ricky covered in dry, cracked mud and green vines, Ricky is going to look like a bandaged casualty. But by adding that colorful feather, Stu turns a functional prosthesis into an accessory.
It's the equivalent of adding a beautiful, intuitive user interface to a really powerful piece of software.
Exactly.
Like if the code works but the interface is ugly and clinical, people just hate using it. The feather provides dignity to the design.
It proves that the most brilliant innovators don't just solve the mechanical equation, they consider the emotional experience of the end user.
Okay, so the manufacturing is complete, the mud is cured, the vines are tied, the UI feather is in place. All that is left to do is to test the prototype.
The moment of truth.
The text builds this wonderful, quiet tension. The rocks all stand back, feeling nervous. Ricky breathes in deep. He moves slowly at first, just testing out his new mold. And then, for the first time, Ricky the Rock rolls.
A completely successful deployment of the prototype.
It is a massive success. He rolls right down the slope with the others. And the story zooms back out to Bria the ladybug, who has been watching this entire iterative process from the start.
Right, our observer.
She watches her friends play on the hill, and her takeaway is twofold. First, that there is always a way if there is also a will. And second, that when you are surrounded by love, you always have hope.
It's a very sweet, poetic way to close the narrative.
It is.
But for anyone listening to this deep dive, the implications go far beyond a children's rhyme. If you synthesize this entire journey, Stu's methodology, this whole process we just deconstructed, it's a highly applicable framework for tackling complex, seemingly impossible problems in your own industry.
It is a literal blueprint.
It demands that when your team hits a wall, you have to recognize the sunk cost fallacy and just stop taping rubber balls to bad ideas.
Yeah.
You have to stop shoving the flawed product harder into the market, hoping the laws of physics will change.
Which is so hard to do in practice.
It is. But instead, you need to cultivate cognitive flexibility. Look for the rain,
Yeah.
That external shift that suddenly makes old resources viable in new ways.
Right.
And most importantly, you have to meticulously build a solution that addresses the root structural deficit while maintaining the dignity and experience of the user you're trying to help.
It is a profound shift in how we view problem solving. And it actually brings me back to the very beginning of our conversation.
Oh, yeah.
We talked about how innovation isn't just a lone genius in a lab. We have spent the last, 15 minutes rightly praising Stu's brilliant engineering mind. He broke through functional fixedness. He mapped out the supply chain. He understood composite material.
Below that, yeah.
But there is one final piece of this puzzle that I want to leave you, the listener, with to ponder on your own.
What is the missing piece?
Think about the timeline here. Stu would never have had his eureka moment in the rain if the rest of the rocks hadn't stubbornly stayed out there with Ricky.
Oh, wow.
Remember, Ricky was ready to quit. He explicitly said it's no use. The project was dead. But the group refused to let him be isolated. They sat there in the dirt with him, enduring the failure until the rain finally came.
The breakthrough was entirely dependent on their solidarity. The timeline actually required them to hold the space open.
Exactly. And it begs this fascinating question for you to take into your own work this week. How often do we heap all the credit onto the single genius innovator who finally spots the mud, while entirely ignoring the invisible, stubborn support system that actually kept the problem alive long enough for that breakthrough to happen?
It completely redefines what it means to be part of an innovation team.
Right.
The genius needs the crucible, and the crucible is built by the people who refuse to pack up and go home when the first few attempts fail.
So the next time you find yourself staring at a flat-sided problem when the quick fixes have failed and the obvious answers are just nowhere to be found, don't just wait around for a lone genius to have a light bulb moment. Look around for the people who are willing to sit in the rain with you, holding the problem open until the mud is finally ready to be molded.